Hello, hello. In celebration of Cowboy Bebop getting a live action thing, which I don't know if that's going to be good or not, I'll draw Aisha. Those are from the same series, right? Right, guys? Right? You have to give me this because there's not a single sexy character in all of Cowboy Bebop. I'll let that rest intentionally because I know, ooh, Faye Valentine, she's a sick one. No, there's nothing remotely sexy about Faye Valentine. Really, she looks her best whenever she first wakes up and she's just like a normal person, dressed in normal person clothing. And she just looks pretty there. Like, she looks very nice. But whenever she starts putting on this stupid yellow whatever it is and her shorty shorts, and she starts dressing like a skank, she just starts looking disgusting. Like, I don't know what it is. This is not universal, but like a Cindy, I think, from Final Fantasy 15 is another example of this, where where someone will dress someone up to be sexy, but to me it's just like ugh, like something about it, like it's not even like the sexual connotation. It's more just it makes them, I don't know what it is triggering something inside of me, and it makes them kind of look like they're oily or like dirty or filthy, like they're greasy. I have no idea what it is, but something about that is like a huge turnoff for me. Of course, you'll notice when I'm doing my own characters, typically they might expose some skin. Like, it depends on how much control I have over the design, since I'm drawing fan art most of the time. But usually, they either have a lot of clothing, in the case of me putting armor on everything, or they at least just have, like, a lot of form-fitting, there's just a lot of garments on it, but it's still somewhat form-fitting, I guess is the way to say. I very rarely will have someone dress kind of in a slutification sort of get up. To me, that's just, it's not like even like a moral stance or anything. It just looks gross to me. But anyways, Aisha is a pretty lady. If you can call her a lady. She's not exactly a lady. I always liked her the best whenever I watched Outlaw Star. I never really thought too much of the women from Outlaw Star, actually. What are the other ones? Like Merle, I think, and there's the Weeaboo lady. Weeaboo lady just exists. Like, she's just, oh, it's a Japanese show, let's put in the Japanese character. And she's just kind of there. There's nothing really interesting about her, certainly nothing sexual about her. A couple of times they try to make it seem like there's something going on, but it just... Pee-pee, stay down. Pee-pee, stay down. Very down. Nothing there. Same with, whatever her name is. I think it's Merle. What a weird name. Yeah, she kind of just exists. She's the like stereotypical Japanese shrine maiden sort of personality, where she's just kind of there. There's not really much to her. She's quiet and submissive, and she just exists. She's just barely a person. So Aisha definitely way more up my alley. You can even take away the catgirl playful thing and just it's still fine. This, I'm drawing her specifically because, if you remember in a prior video, the Finico one, I said that I did a poll for all my upper-level Patreon people, and they wanted to see Finico. I got that out of the way. Once I finally had time, I went back to the second most popular, and that's Aisha. And actually, I was going to do a different art gripe than this before, and it was going to be for, if I can remember to put it up, this picture, which is fine anyways. This picture ends up being better than that one anyways. But I was going to draw Claire from the summoning, and I ended up not doing it because of the frame rate on the video that I recorded for that art gripe, which that one actually took way longer to draw than this one did, amazingly. That took, I I think like 7 hours or so. This one I took about 6.5, I guess, total. But the frame rate was so low that for some reason, whenever I ported it into my video editor and started doing the time lapse, like you see here, there was a lot of like jittering and it would hang every few seconds. It is very unusual. So this time around, I recorded at 5 frames a second. Whereas that one, I think I mistakenly recorded at 1 frame a second, which is foolish because if you think about it, if you're watching video, it has to be 30 frames a second. So naturally, you would have to make something that's recorded at 1 frame a second move at 30 times its original speed in order to actually play correctly. Or at least 24. Which I tried doing, and it actually ended up looking like crap. So I just did another one. That's what I did. With Aisha here, you can see we're not even done with her primary yet, because I keep trying different things. As I keep saying in all of my art videos, like, never commit to one thing. Like, a single primary is never enough to just say, oh, well, that's good enough, let's just roll with this. You're not really going to make many advancements if you just keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. As I've said many times in the past, perfect practice makes perfect is not true in regards to art at all. It may be for, like, baseball or, like, sports, like throwing something, shooting a basketball. It is not in regards to art specifically because with art, if you keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, you will eventually become really proficient at drawing badly. So much of this is just figuring out new ways of approaching things, because it's not the same as just, I will shoot a ball into a hoop, and that's it. That's all I will ever do. With that, there's a right and a wrong. With art, there is no right or wrong necessarily. It's just different approaches. So if you just keep doing it the same way forever, then you're just doing yourself a disservice. You're, forcing yourself into a rut. And you're just going to live in that little hole that you made for yourself. With this one in particular, this Aisha thing, and I've said this too, there will be days where I wake up and there's something about my body chemistry and nothing is hitting on all cylinders. Just absolutely nothing. I also drew another picture recently of Chile and Broly and Limo. And that day, whenever I was doing the primary, everything was hitting on all cylinders as far as, that day, I was just drawing the primary, and it took almost no time at all. Everything felt very natural. I had almost no problems. And it's not as though I was just really good that day. Like I've said before, I think it's just body chemistry. It's just something about what's going on in my body that day that is causing whatever controls that center my brain to just hit on all cylinders. It's not a matter of inspiration, it's more mechanical than that, unfortunately. Something that I've often thought about myself is I actually do not have good line control. Like, I have a lot of nervous system problems, and I shake a lot and, fall over, blah, blah, blah. It's like a form of Tourette's of some sort. No, not every form of Tourette's is the shouty, sweary kind. This is a different thing. So I naturally don't really have that much control in drawing. If you've ever watched some people draw, they require no primary at all. They just sit down and just start drawing, and it's just amazing on the first attempt. They're very slow at doing it, but they're just amazing at it. I cannot do that. Everything gets very shaky and loose, and the form starts to, wobble. Like, you can see whenever I was drawing up my primaries here, I was having that problem. So I've often thought I'm just not very good at drawing. It's just that I've done it so much, and I focus so much on doing shorter strokes and working up my primaries as opposed to just trying to do them right the first time. That's what carries me through. Like, the fact that I can create a good form is mainly just because I keep trying. I keep doing layers of primaries and reiterating the process until I get something that I like. If I just focused on just doing it slowly and correctly the first time, then it would always look like trash. And with Aisha here, you can notice I've I did that many times. The first one the first one that I drew looked fine for the most part. It was just that sort of static 1/4 shot that I usually do, which I've been doing since high school. And that's a very comfortable role for me that I kind of get myself situated into. But whenever I was doing this, this is going to be a video. I can't just crank this out. And I was getting annoyed with myself for it being that boring of a drawing in the first place. So I just kept going back over it over and over and over again until I got a pose that I actually liked. And I think even you could see me here working that up, I think 3 or 4 times minimum. And even this one, of course, is not the final line work. And that torso right there also gets replaced. I was trying to, like, with her left arm specifically, you can see that I was trying to have a bit of foreshortening going on as far as the left half of her body. It is left. I have it flipped. Right. Okay, yeah, left. The left half of her body is a little bit further away than the right half. Like her arm is extending towards the camera. It's very difficult for me to actually pull that off correctly. Because, oh, by the way, I have my window open as I'm recording. I attempted a recording of this once before that lasted about 2 minutes, and I mentioned that at the beginning. But if you hear any boofing or birds chirping or other bullshit like that, like nature horse shit, and that's what it is the beautiful sounds of nature. But it's kind of hard to pull out that foreshortening because if you over-exaggerate it, which you definitely can, but that's usually something that you shouldn't do all the time, then you can end up with a character who has a head the size of a pin, but has a giant hand that's encompassing the entire canvas. And if you actually draw their other arm, then it'll just be like a line, and that's all it's going to be. So getting like that perfect sort of balance and ratio with foreshortening is pretty difficult. And here, like, I have this quote-unquote final primary, and I still don't like the look of it. And I started comparing it to that first one, and here's another thing. This is the reason why I always save my very first primaries, is because whenever I'm doing that sort of thick brush, like, gestural thing, where I'm kind of almost drawing not even a skeleton, but just a general form, usually whenever I do that, I'm trying to create something that is just the energy of the drawing. Like, I'm not worrying about whether it's correct or not. I'm just trying to draw something that I like the look of from a distance. Like, it's as much of a thumbnail drawn in a large pose as I can get. And those are useful in going back and looking at it and seeing what your original intent was. And as you can move away from that, of course. There's no right or wrong. But sometimes you can go back and go, well, I really like the look of that original, even though it's not finished. And I lost that along the way. And that's what happened with this one. I looked at that original and said, well, I like that, and this one is not really that. And that's okay, but I think this could be better. I think I could do this a little bit better. So I switched it up, and now I'm working on, I think, the final primary stage. So, lessons learned. This entire process of doing all these primaries, I think, took about 2 hours before I actually got to the point where I could start working on the actual line work. So, you can see how long it takes. For me, anyways. Like here, I'm doing the same thing. I started working on this and thinking, well, this will be the very final piece of it. And then I started thinking, well, I couldn't quite capture that original spirit of that first one. So let me go back to the very first one, and you can see what I'm doing here, like tracing that out, making it a little bit cleaner, and then saying, well, I'm just going to piece them together. And that's when I sort of finalized the torso here. So it looks almost exactly the same as it did before, except it's a little bit more shored up. And this is just one of many reasons why I say that you should spend most of your time on a drawing, if you're doing line work anyways, just working on your primary. Just spending a lot of time doing the draft. Of course, that's just me. I love doing the draft portion of a drawing. Once I start getting into the coloring and the line work, I kind of fizzle out. And to say a minor update, uh, I'm experimenting with having someone edit together a video for me, and that'll be a Let's Gripe. Yeah, I forgot about that series too. Let's Gripe about villains in this case. I went back and found uh, an old series of audio files I was working on whenever I was doing my last Dark Gripe that I never finished, and that was my Let's Gripe about characters. But in listening to it, I thought, wow, this is more of the plague character that I still sort of do that in my like little anime things, the Naruto video and the Dragon Ball video. Those are more like character based, where I'm like intentionally trying to be as like crass and like willful and angry as possible, because that's more of the plague character. Um, and that was like cranked up to 11 on that one. I don't know what was going on that year, but this is back in like 2016. So I decided, I can't even use this because the audio was also like messed up for some reason, and I'm not really sure why. It exported incorrectly, so I couldn't use it either way. So I decided to just rewrite the whole thing, re-record it, and everything. So someone else is actually working on the video component to that. Got our bangs wrong here. The primary is actually incorrect, and I realized that as I started drawing the other side. So I re-recorded that and sent that off. In the meantime, of course, I'm working on my art gripes here. I actually found a little bit of time, like one day, to actually start reworking on the scary lesson stuff, which was only enough time to just reread it and reevaluate everything and go, yeah, okay, this was like I started reading it, and the very first was like, oh, this is just it's not starting well. It's not showing enough of what the tone of the story is going to be, and it's being very self-critical. And then I kept reading. It's like, well, the middle and the end are fine. I like the rest of this. So if I actually manage to get any progress done on that, which I kind of doubt, then I'll probably start work on that. I'll probably be able to go back to the very beginning and actually shore that up using the information that I established later on, I should say. I started trying to move on with my thoughts, and I confused myself. The other thing that I'll be working on is I'm going to start a new animation, and no, I'm not going to say what it is because I can't promise, and I'm actually going to do it. But I haven't started any recording or writing for it yet, but I know exactly what it's going to be. So I probably should be able to start that somewhat soon. Because of the fact that I was so violently ill for so long, that really just fucked up everything as far as my attempt to do a schedule was going. So my desire to get more work done on the scary lessons thing more than zero, which is what ended up happening, fell through completely. So I ended up just spending a good month in bed and nothing else. Yay, life. So that's it. That's what's in theory going to be coming up, and I hope to not disappoint. So here, with Aisha, finally got all that drafting done. This is final line work. You can see I'm working with a low brush size. Usually what I will do, of course, as I've mentioned before, I've gotten more focused on doing variable lines, which I've showed off in videos before, where I'm focusing more on the thickness of lines and trying to partition up the form of the drawing using that variable thickness. But I've gotten to where I start doing that in a secondary pass. So typically, I've gotten to where I'm doing this, where I will do the basic line work first with a uniform brush size and then go back over it later on. This is very general, but I think I found that most artists typically focus either more on painting or they use very thin lines. So to that end, if you're doing that, then obviously this is not going to apply to you, but for someone like me that's focusing more on trying to make things look not cartoony, but this very specific style of mine, where it's sort of not realistic, but it's plague. Like I don't even know what to call it. It's just my style, I guess. Then it's very unique to me. So whatever you want to call that particular kind of style. Aisha, I was kind of the reason why I spent so much time really on this primary is because I've always had problems drawing Aisha. I don't know what it is. Like there's been even though I can only remember releasing one image. I've tried the drawer before, and it just never comes together. I always have problems drawing very specific characters, like Princess Peach is another one. And even though they're not really similar in terms of construction, I have that same sort of problem. And it comes down to the gestures and form of the model that I'm trying to emulate are so specific to that character that it's very easy to almost get them right. Like, I've seen a lot of pictures of Aisha. People enjoy drawing her. But they almost never look like the character. Usually, like, I don't really like, oh, it has to be on model or else it's bad. That's bullshit. But there's a difference between it being straight up on model and sort of capturing the original feeling of what the character is, if that makes sense. Like, you can still present it in your own style, but it either captures the character's essence or it doesn't. And there's been many cases where I feel like a drawing of a character looks nothing like their on-model version, but you can tell, oh, this is that character. This is the spirit of that character. This is in a completely different style, but if it was presented in that style, this is what they would look like. You know, that sort of thing. But a lot of people draw Aisha as, like, very pretty and, like, very flowing and sort of... even if, like, she's presented as being wild, like, the drawing looks too elegant, in a way. Like, a lot of people will emphasize how cat-like she is, I guess. And to that end, she'll look very soft. And she'll look very... like, she has that anime sparkly eye thing going on as well. And that's just not her. You know, it still looks good as a drawing, but it's just not her. And it's really hard trying to find that balance between this is a completely different style, but this is still definitely that character. And with Aisha, to me, capturing the whole, like, strong cat girl wild thing is pretty easy. You know, in my case, because that's just what I do all the time anyways. More the difficulty is just the gestures. Her hair, specifically, is always a problem, because even in the show, it was never really well defined. She doesn't really have core shapes to her hair. Like, if you think of Goku from Dragon Ball, even if you, like, can't draw him from memory, you still know, well, he has a spike here, a spike there, and a spike here. And there's, like, a certain amount... it's almost like Mickey Mouse's ears. Like, they just don't change. As he shifts his head, he's always drawn the same way. So you know that there's a certain number of individual shapes that you have to draw, and if you draw those shapes, then you're done. Like, you don't have to worry about it. There's a rule set to his model. So even if you're drawing in a different style, then there are still things that will make him look like Goku. And this is part of a good character design, is being able to have those things so that even whenever someone draws them in a completely different style, you know, then there's still a recognizable character. That's why you're told to focus on things like silhouettes so often, because that makes them defined. Whereas if it's a character that is just, like, they're just a person, it's just like some white, bald man in a t-shirt. You know, this generic man. Like me. Like me! It's me. It's a me! Generic white man. If you do that, then, like, what is defining them? If someone redrew me in their own style, what exactly would define me? In my specific case, I guess, since I mentioned that, stupidly, It would probably be the flatness of my brow that I usually draw myself with, my expression. So as long as I'm retaining that expression, then it's very easy to say, oh, well, that's me, as long as you have like facial hair and everything else. So even though, like, my character design in real life is very simple, I'm just sort of bald white man with an angry expression. So as long as you have that, then you're pretty much golden. Uh, with with your Gokus or your Marios or whatever, there are certain things that are on their character sheet that you know, oh, suspenders, I'll draw that. Oh, a hat, I'll draw that. And it becomes very easy to emulate it no matter how you're drawing. With Aisha, you can draw her, but it doesn't really look like her. Because there are those certain elements of her design that are very hard to get down. And in drawing her, there are a few things that kind of fudge that for me. I'll point them out specifically for her. One is her outfit, like her little armor thing that she has on her chest. It sort of moves along with the rib cage, but that's a solid piece. It's not cloth, and it restricts how like lithe that you can actually make her. So typically in the show, they would draw her extremely cat-like in that she's very tall, very slim, almost almost tube-like sometimes. And that stretches her out enough that you don't really have to worry about that armor piece. So there's more opportunities to have it not intersecting other parts of her body. Whereas if you draw with a normal body shape, like a human body shape, then if she tries to bend, then that sort of impacts against her stomach. If she tries to move to the sides, and you have to worry about it shifting as a solid piece, that's just a problem as far as the center of her body goes. If I were like redesigning her myself, I would probably make it just part of the cloth and not worry about it being armor. The fact that her like leotard thing also stretches down to where her shoulders are also presents a few problems in regards to posing her from time to time. Her like a neck bracer thing with the bell, which is super cute, don't get me wrong, but that also creates some problems because it's drawn very thick, because her body again is very long, so they can get away with it on their model. But if you draw her with a normal body, then you have to sort of slim that down, make it more normalized, and make the bell smaller as a result. So again, it starts not looking like her. But the biggest problem by far is her head, because her hair, again, does not have defined shapes. She does not have Goku hair, where you say, there's bang number 1, there's bang number 2. And here's the things in the back, like there's triangle 1, triangle 2, triangle 3. And here we are, final line work. As far as the final of the first pass, anyways. There we go. Now the long road begins to shoring up the line thickness, the variable line thickness I was talking about. Enjoy that for the next hour, as I did. But yeah, in the show, even though I drew her with like bang 1, bang 2, because I made sure that I could, and the actual show is just all over the place. Like, different people draw her with completely different segments of hair, because her model just does not define that area. It's just all over the place. Another problem with her is that since she, again, is drawn so long and lithe looking, and there's a certain resolution for the cells that they're drawing with the show, then her facial proportions also typically don't use a huge amount of the sort of canvas space of where her face would be. So in some cases, she has an extremely long face, but there's a very specific proportional ratio and distance between her nose, mouth, and eyes, with most of the focus on her eyes, that you have to get perfectly or else it looks strange. And other times, especially in zoomed-in shots, then her eyes, her actual expression takes up a normal proportion, and her face becomes normal proportions for the sake of that shot. And then they focus way more on her eyes and eyebrows. And she also has that sort of headband thing that pushes down her expression even further, which makes it that more problematic if you are drawing her with that nun sort of lithe body type. And also, another thing, like I don't like her ears normally. I sort of got away with it this time by making her skin color also the inside of her ear color, which I'll get to later. Obviously, I haven't gotten the color yet. But in the show, they it's typically the ears are two different colors and none of them match any of the surrounding colors, which makes no sense at all. It's so weird. It's that Japanese thing where they like anytime they what do they call them, Nico Mimis or something. I don't fucking know. Fucking weebs. But anytime they do that, typically the Japanese way of drawing the furries is that they will draw a normal girl, whether or not she's a hulking, like, Amazoness or whatever. They'll still draw like a normal person, and then they sort of attach what I like to call hairbands, like hairband ears to them. And in Aisha's case, they're off to the side, but normally they're up top. Where it's just, here's a normal girl, we're going to cover her ears with hair, so you can't see where her ears normally would be, and then we're just going to lower the, like it's like an EVA unit, like component, we're going to attach them, like the machine is coming down, and you hear the screws going, and the ratchets fire up and whatnot. And then you have yourself a cat girl, because it's just a normal girl and we just put this shit on top. Done. We're done, right? And that's typically the Japanese way of handling it, for whatever other reasons. I guess they're afraid of making things look too abnormal, so there's this need to like normalize them by distinguishing the fact that they are normal, but they also have animal components that aren't really there, like visually. It's very strange. It's hard to understand what exactly their internal process is. So it ends up making a lot of character designs look bizarre because of that reason. So Aisha is sort of an example of that, where she has like a normal body and there's just these ears that have nothing to do with her design. They're just sort of sticking out. And it looks really stupid in terms of color. Like really like the top of her ears here, I followed the model as closely as I felt like I wanted to. But really, the top of her ears there should be probably more her, like, hair color. I guess probably if I had to do a do-over on her entire design, I would probably divide her hair color up so that, she's not like a skunk or anything, but maybe she has, like the lower part of her hair be one color and the top is another, or something of that nature. I would have to play with it so that the upper portion of her ears would either match the up top or the bottom or something of that nature. That'd probably be my solution. So there's that. Probably the last problem child of her design, in terms of her face, is the shape of her eyes. Aisha has a very, very... Like, all the characters in Outlaw Star have very, very specific ways of drawing them. I don't know... Like, I would have to look it up real fast, but I don't know who the actual designer and everything was. But it's a very particular way of drawing characters. And if you don't get it just so... And some styles are like this. If you don't get them just right, then it's really hard to translate them. And Aisha is one of the worst because all the characters do have this sort of very similar way of drawing the eyes. And you'll notice, you can look at her while I'm talking, her eyes, the bottom part of the eye, that bottom stroke, always goes down. And this is something that a lot of people get wrong. Normally whenever they're drawing the eyes, they just draw whatever. They don't really worry too much about it. And since so much of a character's design is focused on their eyes, it's one of the most important parts to get right, if you're translating things, then it's one of the most significant ways to get a character's design wrong. So with Aisha, or any of the Outlaw Star characters, if you don't get that stroke just so, then it doesn't translate. And even, like, I didn't even draw it on model or anything. I sort of just drew it the way that I wanted to, but made sure to follow along just close enough that I could make it clear, well, this is just my take on the character, right? But I still had to draw that sort of bottom slung. And the top of the eyes does the same thing. Which is a problem because that's also the same general eye shape that people will give characters whenever they look sad or whenever they're looking like droopy. They're just looking droopy. So they'll draw their eyes sort of sloping down on the top stroke and sloping down on the bottom stroke. But these Outlaw Star characters have a very, very specific look about them, so that usually they look both intense, but they also have that droopy eye going on at the same time. It's very, very specific. So if you're not getting it just right, then you sort of fuck up the entire general look of the character. And trying to break down, like just looking at a character sheet, and like it's easy to just look at a character and go, I will draw that character. I enjoy that character. I will draw the character. Then you start drawing the character and you have to wonder, it's not really looking exactly like them. I wonder why that is. And some people never really get past that stage. They just sort of go, well, I guess this is just my take on the character, and then that's it. And they'll eventually over time go, well, there are some characters that I'm good at drawing, and some I'm just not good at drawing. And that's as far as they take the logic of it. I'm naturally very analytical. I sort of obsess over breaking things down, why they're not working, why they are. That's where I get my name. Again, I chose the name Plague of Gripes because I know that people have the general perspective that I complain all the time, which is not true. I just overanalyze everything. But I decided, well, that's going to come up anyway, so I'll just choose this name because it'll be more marketable that way. And I've explained that before. But I'm naturally this way. I'm just very analytical. I enjoy breaking things down, trying to figure out why exactly I have the perspective that I do. Some people from time to time say, oh, you're so wise. And of course I have that same reaction I just did just now, thinking about it. I will laugh. But part of that is just because I just evaluate things constantly. I'm always trying to figure out why things are the way that they are, why people are the way that they are. That translates into why I was a writer for a while, etc. By the way, I went over the Dreamers War manuscript. If I didn't, I don't know if I mentioned this or not, but I did the podcast with Wooly on Wooly Will Figure It Out. And I went over the entire manuscript of my novel that I never published. And I went looking for it because I thought, well, it's not complete. But I actually found it, and it's like, this actually is complete. I wonder what was going on there. So I might be able to just reread the whole thing, figure out where it is that I had stopped or what I was doing, because I cannot remember. And I might actually be able to release it. I don't know. Not many people seem that interested in it. But anyways, this is something I've thought about in my off time. But this is part of who I am. It's just my over-analytical nature. So when it comes to character designs, that lends itself to that as well. So I don't really struggle with that exactly. It's more just the mechanical aspect of drawing that I struggle with. As I said at the start of the video, I've never really considered myself to be actually good at drawing so much as just focused on just going back over things over and over and over again until it actually does look correct. There are people that had the same amount of experience that I do that are like light years better than I am in terms of being able to construct form, being able to lay out their line work correctly. I'm just very fast and focused on working up the shapes. So this, like, as you guys know, in terms of like video games, even I'm very anti-mechanical. Like I enjoy trying to play first-person shooters, but if they're PvP oriented, I just cannot because I do not have the mechanical whatever it is inside my brain to be able to do that. I'm too evaluatory. I guess that's not a word, but the best way I can describe it. Because whenever I see someone moving across the screen, a first-person shooter player will their brain just instantly goes, moving shape, move cursor to head, hold down, shooty bang until dead. Me, I want to, look at them, look at the person moving and go, who is that? Is that a target? What are they doing? I start thinking about all these things at the same time, and that's death. Like, the moment that you do that, you just die. Plus, I can't, hold the cursor over someone's head as they're moving, and part of that's just because I don't play games like that very often. But this is just something that I come up with all the time in my life, is just mechanically, I'm not good at things. I've never been proficient at things that are straight up mechanical. Here we're getting to the final bits of this particular picture. So to me, the more decision-based something is, the better off I'm going to be with it. And the same is true for Aisha here. There we go, final picture. I decided to tone up the saturation a little bit. Some people I've noticed complain sometimes about my lack of contrast and tendency to make things desaturated, which I like the look of, actually. But I figured, well, I'll try it this time. So I moved things up a little bit. But yeah, so whenever you're going over and evaluating drawings of whatever it is, like I said, Princess Peach is another example of that because of a very particular way that her head is constructed. But if you're going through and evaluating a model, you need to really look at the strokes of the model and define what it is that's making the character who they are. And maybe I'll do a video like that sometime where I just look at... Actually, I did do a video like that. It was the Goku one. The one where I tried to draw Goku for the first or second time ever. So yeah, you just have to look at the character and try to evaluate what it is that is making them who they are. And the same can go for actual, writing characters as well. Just trying to figure out what it is exactly that signifies this character as being either visually or personality-wise unique. So, there you go. Alright, hope you enjoyed this picture of Aisha, you filthy, filthy perverts. I'll get back to work, and I'll see you guys next time. So long.